Hello friends, this is Mike from Wright, and this is the explanations video for SAT 2 reading section, passage number 2, questions 12 and 13. Now the first thing to note is that there's two questions here. There's an analyzing arguments question, which we'll get into, but there's also a citing textual evidence question that follows it. Now the best way, the ideal way to do these questions, is to know the passage so damn well that you can answer this question without making reference to this question at all, find the right answer to this question, know the quote that supports your answer to this question, find it down here, circle it, move on. That is the fastest and most accurate way of doing these questions, but it also requires a high degree of comprehension. So plan B is go through these answers, try to figure out which ones are your favorite ones, read each of these quotes, and then try to find a match. We'll go through that way once we get to this question. But first, let's take a detailed look at question 12. So again, in the passage, the author anticipates which of the following objections to criticizing the ethics of free markets. Now, this is a really complicated prompt. They're asking a lot more than just which of the following is a thing that happens in the passage. Instead, they're asking for a claim that plays a very specific argumentative role. Now, I've made a couple of diagrams up here to try and help us understand this, because the logic is really complicated. All right, so the author anticipates an objection, and these are the objections. Which of the following objections? So all of these are objections that the author is going to anticipate. Right, the author anticipates objections to criticizing the ethics of free markets. So there's anticipation going on, there's objection going on, there's criticism going on, and then there's finally the subject that we have at hand. So another way of thinking about this is in that left diagram, you have free market ethics. Free market ethics here, this is the idea that the free market, a normal capitalist society, is ethical. Now there are criticisms of free market ethics. Free market ethics is a thing that's being criticized. Then there are objections to that criticism, people who are defending free markets against the criticism. And then there's the author who comes in and anticipates those objections. The author, before somebody can get a chance to object, the author comes in ahead of time, beating them to the punch, and explains that objection first. So that's the left diagram, and here on the right diagram I've just kind of drawn something to try to help us keep track of who's on whose side. There's Team Capitalism and there's Team Karl Marx. Karl Marx, founder of communism and socialism. Great guy, Karl Marx. All right, Team Capitalism. Let's just call the person Jim. Jim thinks free markets are great. I'm Team Capitalism. Oh, free markets, they're so ethical. I'm all about the ethics of free markets. That's me, I'm Jim, that's what I'm about. All right, here comes the critic. Here's the criticism of the ethics of free markets. He's from Team Karl Marx because he's criticizing Team Capitalism. He's saying, nah, free markets are bad and they're dumb. Boom. Nice criticism from the critic. All right, then comes the objector to the critic. This guy's back on Team Capitalism. He's defending Jim against that really eloquent criticism that the critic came up with his own eloquent objection. You're bad and dumb, critic. Nice. All right, so the author's role in this is to look at that objector who's defending the free markets against the critic and to anticipate that objector's objection. The author is coming in ahead of time before the objector can voice their objection and anticipating that objection to the critic of Jim, the free market guy. That puts the author, generally speaking, on Team Karl Marx, although obviously his viewpoints aren't quite that extreme. But the author is, anyway, anticipating people defending the free markets, or really defending the idea of free market ethics. That's the claim we're looking for. So again, it's not enough to just have a claim. The critic's claim isn't the right answer. We're not looking for a criticism of the free markets. We're looking for an anticipation of the objection of the criticism, right? We're not looking for a straightforward defense of the free markets, right? We're looking for an anticipation of an objection, blah, 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 blah. All right. So let's look at each of these answer choices under that lens. Starting with answer choice A. Which of the following is an objection? This is the objection that the author anticipates. Smith's association of free markets with ethical behavior still applies today. Now, before we go into what role it plays in the argument, let's think about this claim. The claim is that Adam Smith's association of free markets with ethical behavior, Adam Smith saying that free markets and ethical behavior are somehow related, that idea still applies today. It has relevance today. Okay, now let's entertain this idea and let's see if it has any support in the passage, and I think it does. The place where you might see the support for this in the passage comes from lines 20 through to 26. Here, these examples, I think, give us a sense of what this claim is actually saying. These examples, this is where the author, right, is in the middle of it describing Adam Smith's viewpoint. Ethics is empathy, empathy is dumb, it's all about outcomes. And then the author gives a bunch of modern-day, real-world examples of Adam Smith's ideas. Whenever planners use cost-benefit analysis to justify a new railway line, whenever someone retrains to boost his or her earning power, or a shopper buys one to get one free, they're using the same approach. They're using the Adam Smith approach, empathizing with someone, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So in the passage, there is such a thing as Adam Smith's association of ethics with free markets. And the author does make a point that this idea in general, that Adam Smith's ideas in general, still apply today. The problem, though, is that the question isn't asking us which of the following is a claim that is in the passage somewhere. The question is asking us which of the following is an objection that the author anticipates. So again, we're here in the objection land. We're looking for these objections that the author anticipates. These are objections to criticisms of Jim, right? Here, the role of this claim that Adam Smith's ideas are still relevant today, think about the viewpoint of that claim. Think about who thinks Adam Smith's ideas are relevant today. Now, it's the author. The author thinks that Adam Smith's ideas are still relevant today. That's why the author came up with all of these examples, to show that Adam Smith's ideas are still relevant today. Now, if it's the author who came up with those ideas, here this is an author claim, it can't very well be an objection that the author is anticipating. An objection would be on the other side of the author on this issue. Here we're looking at a claim that the author is just making straightforwardly, and there's the wrongness of answer choice A. It isn't that it's not something that happens in the passage, it's the wrong kind of thing. All right, on to answer choice B. Free markets are the best way to generate high profits, so ethics are a secondary consideration. Now again, you want to take a step back. All of the language in this question, and mostly, honestly, all of these questions, is so complex. You really want to try to take a moment to step back and read it to yourself in English, translate it to yourself in English. Free markets are the best way to generate high profits. Free markets are the best way to generate high profits. Free markets let us make money. They're the best way of making money. Free markets give us money, so ethics is a secondary consideration. All right, maybe that idea is familiar to you. The idea would be familiar to you from the idea up here where Wright means more than just profits or efficiency. Here in the annotations video, I was making a joke about economists only recently learning that punching babies might be bad even though it's profitable. And it's that implied position of the previous economists that might be tempting here, right? There are some people who might think that ethics is all about making profits, right? Free markets are the best way to maximize our profits, so screw ethics. Right? Now, argumentatively, this actually is a pretty solid, well, I think it is on team capitalism for sure. I'm making my money, screw ethics, right? That's team capitalism for sure. So we are on the right team, so to speak. It does seem, though, like a straightforward defense of the free markets rather than an objection to a criticism of free markets. But more specifically than that, in the passage itself, the role of this claim that Wright means more than just profits or efficiency, this isn't a position that only some people or one person on one side of this debate is taking. This is a position that both people on both sides of the debate agree upon. Here, recent debates about the economy have rediscovered the question, is that right? Where right means more than just profits or efficiency. That is to say, on both sides of the debate, we're both thinking about rightness as meaning more than just profits or efficiency. And all of the viewpoints that the author is talking about, Aristotle's viewpoint, Adam Smith's viewpoint, the actions viewpoint, all of these are different ways of thinking of rightness as more than just profits or efficiency, but still applying that concept of rightness to the field of economics. Which is all just to say that everybody agrees that this perspective is not the right one. Everybody agrees that rightness is more than just profits or efficiency. So there's no defense of the free markets here that makes this claim, that because free markets give us lots of money, ethics is secondary. There's no such claim in the passage. Okay, answer choice C. Free markets are ethical because they are made possible by devalued currency. Now, devalued currency, that's a buzzword. You might remember that word from your read-through of the passage. It happens on line 52. Here, all right, it happens right here. When a finance official refuses to devalue a currency because they have promised not to, they are defining ethics this way. According to this approach, devaluation can still be bad, even if it would make everybody better off. All right, so let's think again. Okay, you might be tempted by this claim because it says devaluation. It talks about currency devaluation, and that's a thing. Congratulations on remembering it. They mentioned devalued currency, and that might make you excited enough to pick this answer. But again, it's not about, this question isn't which of the following is a thing that appears in the passage. And actually, this is one of the most common ways they trick you, is by putting in things that you feel really proud that you remembered, but they're not mentioning those things in the context of the right claims. Here, the claim they're making about devalued currency is that it makes free markets possible. That's a pretty strong claim. Here again, free markets are ethical because, why are they ethical? Because they are made possible by devalued currency. Without devalued currency, we would have no free markets at all. That's a very big and a very abstract claim, and it's not at all what the author is talking about when he talks about devalued currency. Devalued currency in here, in the annotations video I said you don't even need to know what it is. Still true. You don't need to know what it is, right? All we need to know, though, is that it is an example of viewpoint number 3. It's an example of people thinking of ethics as a list of do's and don'ts, about people focusing on actions, and it's one specific action you can do, devaluing a currency. Here in the example, the finance official doesn't want to do that because they promised not to, and the focus of this example is really on the promise. The promising is, breaking promises is a bad action. Don't break promises, says ethics, this list of do's and don'ts. So the person decides not to devalue the currency because they've promised not to. There is no mention in here about a link between devaluing currency and the possibility of free markets. That's why it's wrong. Not enough that it just shows up at all. It needs to show up in the exact right way. All right, answer choice D. Free markets are ethical because they enable individuals to make choices. Now, if you're really on the ball, maybe if you did this passage untimed, you remember that buzzword choices, and you skeptically go back to the place where you remember that buzzword choices, and it occurs in the context of this claim right here. And this is, this is the money claim. Some argue that because the free markets allow for personal choice, they are already ethical. And here the note that I wrote is that there's a viewpoint here. It's not the author speaking. It's the author putting this view in somebody else's mouth, and this is the some people view. Some people say that the free markets are ethical because they allow for choice. In these some people's view, choice is what makes free markets already ethical. All right, let's think about the role that this plays, right? Well, and I guess, okay, so first off, here let's think about whether this quote matches this thing right here, and the answer to that is yes. Free markets are ethical because they enable individuals to make choices. And that's just literally, almost word for word. It's very straightforwardly what is being said right here. So there's a very high quality match. More than that, though, this claim plays the right argumentative role. It is an objection that the author anticipates to a criticism of a defense of the free market. That is to say, that the author anticipates this objection. The author comes in pretty early on in the passage and says, some people might think this. right? The author anticipates this viewpoint. The author wants to get this viewpoint out in the open right away so that he can move past it. What this is an objection. This claim is an objection to a criticism of the free markets. Here, people have been debating in the past the question of is this right or wrong, where right means more than just profits or efficiency. And you can see here in these others' perspective, the others, the people who are on the other side of this debate, they've accepted the ethical critique and they've embraced corporate responsibility. These others are under the impression that corporations need to go above and beyond to be responsible. Right? These people are criticizing the ethics of the free, unregulated, unencumbered markets. And these some people right here are saying the free markets, they're fine the way they are. Because they allow for personal choice, they're completely fine the way they are. So there's a sort of perfect one-for-one match here, both in terms of the wording, of the purported claim and the claim that actually shows up in the passage. And the claim also plays the exact right argumentative role. It's an objection that the author anticipates to a criticism of the ethics of free markets. All right, now ideally you get here yourself and you find quote 4 through 5 because you made some note of it while you were reading, and then you circle answer choice A because you know that that's the answer, and then you move on. That's the quickest way. That said, especially with this question, I think it's very reasonable not to have gotten there. And it makes a lot of sense to have to go through the quotes yourself looking for a match. Now, we're going to go through each of these quotes word for word, and what we're looking for, what our standard is the entirety of the support for one of these claims, whichever one of these claims is right, needs to come from within one of these quotes. It's as though one of these quotes is, it's almost as though one of these quotes is the entirety of the passage, and all of the support, word for every single word in these above claims, needs to come from within these quotes. So let's take them one by one. We've already covered answer choice A and its rightness, so let's just skip straight to B. And we're looking at lines 7 through 10 from but to about. And it's really important here not to read any more or any less than the quote. So here we're going to start with but. But before we can label any market outcome as immoral or sneer at economists who try to put a price on being ethical, we need to be clear on what we're talking about. Now, in my effort to try to sympathize with like who picks this choice, I think it's compelling because it might be an anticipation. The author is definitely anticipating stuff here. The author's saying, before we can do this, before we can do that, we need to do this stuff. So the stuff where he's saying, oh, before we can do this, before we can do that, this is the stuff he's anticipating. But it turns out that those things that he's anticipating are criticisms of the free market, not objections to criticisms of the free market. Another way of putting that is, right, they're on Team Karl Marx. They're critics. They're not objecting to the critics. They're not capitalistic objections to critics from Team Karl Marx. All right, so let's just like show that, right? Before we can label any market outcome as immoral. Here, this is the act of labeling an outcome as immoral. You're saying the free market does this thing, that's immoral. That's a criticism of the free market, right? We're not looking for criticisms, we're looking for objections to criticisms. Same thing with sneering at economists who try to put a price on being ethical, right? Being ethical is the effort of trying to be good. And putting a price on that, putting a price tag on that, yeah, I'm down to be ethical, but only at the right price. And then sneering at someone who does that, being like, whoa, that's like, ugh, God, what a scummy thing to do. That act of sneering at people who try to put a price tag on being ethical, that's also a criticism of the free markets. It's not an objection to the criticism of the ethics of the free market. And that's one of the reasons why this answer choice is wrong. Now, another separate reason is that it doesn't match up with any of these claims. All right, answer choice C. Lines 21 through 22 from Smith to outcome. Here, Smith justifies selfish behavior by the outcome. Boom, straight up. Very short quote. All right, tempting probably in part because it mentions Adam Smith. And, we mentioned Adam Smith up here, right? Smith's something. This says Smith, that says Smith. Answers A and C. Well, the test is harder than that. I mean, the fact that I had to draw all these damn diagrams makes you know that it's harder than that. It's not enough that it just mentions Smith. It needs to mention the exact claim that is being made here. It needs to provide support for this exact claim, and then the claim itself needs to play the right role. Now, we know the claim doesn't play the right role, but here's the first question. does the quote that we were looking at here, Smith justifies selfish behavior by the outcome, is that support for Smith's association with ethical behavior still applies today? It's not just that this quote needs to be about like in the same neighborhood as the quote it's supposed to match with. The entirety of the support for the claim made in Answer Choice 12A needs to come from this quote here. Now, the quote in 12A, again, was talking about the relevance of Adam Smith's ideas. Now, this is something we know that the author thinks. We were talking about the real-world examples the author was giving. Man, like every time you do this, every time you do a cost-benefit analysis, every time you go to the store and buy one, get one free, that's Adam Smith right there. Still applies today. Now, this is a different quote. This isn't that quote. This is a quote that just says, Smith justifies selfish behavior by the outcome. Auspiciously missing is any indication of still applies today. There's no recency to this quote, right? There's nothing saying that these ideas are relevant. These are talking about Smith's original ideas. I think that's one of the big red flags here. Okay. Separately, you might think that this pairs with 12B, which is the claim that free markets are the best way to generate high profits, so ethics are a secondary consideration. Here, generally, because Adam Smith doesn't like empathy, he's all about self-interest, and he's all about, well, the outcomes, right? Smith justifies selfish behavior by the outcomes. It's okay to be selfish if you've got good outcomes. Maybe here you think profits are the same thing as outcomes, right? Free markets are the best way to generate high profits. Maybe those high profits are good outcomes, so ethics are a secondary consideration. Again here, the entirety of the support for this claim needs to come from this quote, and this quote doesn't give us all of the support we need for that. First off, for Adam Smith, generally speaking, ethics is not a secondary consideration. He thinks ethics is all about empathy, but that empathy is counterproductive, and that self-interested behavior is what generates best outcomes, and that outcomes become the basis of empathy. He justifies selfish behavior by its outcomes, and justification is ethical justification. It means that you're ethically allowed to do selfish things because of the outcomes. It isn't that ethics is secondary. It's that his view of ethics says that selfish behavior is okay. It's not like an I've got mine, screw your ethics. It's like me trying to get mine is what made everybody better off, so I'm ethical. Okay. Last but not least, and I think really not least, this is kind of the main reason, this is down here, this claim here that we're talking about fills the wrong argumentative role. This claim of Smith in general, any of his beliefs, either the one that's mentioned in question 12 or this one where he's justifying selfish behavior by the outcome. These are not objections to a criticism of free market ethics. These are just things Adam Smith thinks. If anything, they're Jim's attitude right here. Free markets are great. There's no sort of argumentative interplay where Adam Smith is responding to critics and the author is objecting to Adam Smith's perspective. On to answer choice D. 13D says lines 52 through 54, from when to way. When a finance official refuses to devalue a currency because they have promised not to, they are defining ethics this way. All right, well, this answer choice is meant to be the pair of 12C up here, the one that made you get all excited because you remembered this obscure fact, devalued currency, right? But it's wrong just because it pairs okay with this claim doesn't make this claim any more right. Now, this claim is still wrong for the same reasons. Even though devalued currency is in the passage, the claim itself isn't supported. The exact reasons why we read this quote earlier and said this quote doesn't support the claim. There's no link between devalued currency and free markets being possible. It's not true that devalued currency is what makes free markets possible. Is the exact same reason why this quote doesn't support this claim. Answer choice D, just because it mentions devalued currency doesn't make it a perfect match with this claim. All right, that's all for these answer choices, and I'll see you in the next video.